Safety glasses must be worn anytime you're at the lab station, right? Everybody okay there? Short pants, open-toed shoes, footwear is not allowed in this class. We're dealing with 240 volts, we're 220. Synthetic clothing is not allowed when working in the lab. You'll understand why. If it's on fire, he's going to burn. Leather gloves must be worn, or leather palm. Like I said, any glove that you probably buy to work on an automobile should work okay in this class. If you got any problems, let me see them and I'll let you know. Got to be worked, but only when you're doing measurements or working with energized circuits, right? So when you're wiring the circuit with the power off and your tag up there, it means you're not going to have your leather gloves on. You're still going to have your wire on. So save that. Do not make any connections or circuit modifications while a circuit is energized. You understand that one, right? A short circuit test must be made on each circuit before applying power, and I showed y'all how to do that, right? So you got to disconnect one of the lead on the transformer. It's going to tell you to do that in the lab book, by the way. Biggest problem we have is people come up in there and they're ready to get me to put power on the circuit, and they forget the hook. They don't have the transformer hooked back up. So take your measurement, disconnect one lead of the transformer, check it for short circuit, then connect the lead back up, right? You understand? When I'm ready to put power on. A live voltage test must be performed before making circuit connections or modifications. So rule is don't bet your life on a switch. So the first thing you need to do is that when we turn that disconnect off, is you need to get your meter out and verify that it's off. Contacts get welded together, right? You understand that? We try to do what we can to keep them from doing that, but they get welded together. And you do a disconnect, you lock it out, one of the contacts are welded together, you get over there, you don't check for voltage on your circuit, and you get electrocuted. Or you lock out the wrong circuit. That's happened before too. Verify that both connections are made on the transformer after each short circuit test. Power must be removed from the circuit while awaiting the instructor's sign off or help. Press the e-stop button to remove power. So what you're going to do is when you get ready for a sign off, you're going to come up here, you're going to hit e-stop, you're going to come back over here, and you're going to write your name up here and let me know you're ready for a sign off. And that way there's not anybody that's going to walk around and start talking and accidentally stick their fingers in a live circuit, right? You understand, or you do. I see this all the time where people's trying to talk and they'll be over there pointing with their fingers and the circuit's live. I'm thinking about a guy named Jack Walters, but he knew what he was doing. No more than 2 conductors attached to any terminal. No eating or dip bottles in the classroom or lab. No beverages allowed over near the trainers, right? No chairs allowed at the trainer's workstation. So you're not going to put chairs over there. For one thing, I've got to get through. I'll be up and walking around. I don't walk very often, and you can see I don't walk. I waddle, and so we don't want anything around that I'm going to be able to trip over, right? So when we go to the lab, all your computer bags and stuff, I want you to put those up on the table because I usually walk down through here, and so the way I walk is I use these tables as a cane. So all entries on the lab form must be done in pencil. Unless otherwise specified by the instructor. Experiments will be performed in teams of no more than 2 students. And this is going to work out perfect. We got 5 people we got 10 people in here. So that means we'll use 5 of these stations. We can use any one of them. We'll start inventorying them. If you don't have a part, you can go to one of the stations that's not being used, right, and get a part from those. But don't take a part off a station that's we're going to use. If you notice up in the upper right-hand corner, every station has a number on it. So one of the things you'll do on the sign-off sheet is you'll write the number. You'll put a name and write the number of the station you're working at. Are we okay? We use lab forms in this class. Everybody took a class where y'all had to have lab forms. It's just another piece of paperwork that you get used to. You'll keep up with your time on there. You'll keep up with each time you put on there. And of course, this is where I'll mark off grades. What we do, the lab form is we have to keep records on how we came up with your grade for 5 years after you leave here. So we're supposed to live up. So we're supposed to say you're going to learn this, and then we got to prove it, right? To understand. We originally we used to keep all lab forms and we used to keep all tests, and we would have boxes of documents that we had to keep. Luckily, most of our tests here are online now, right? You understand that? So that eliminated that. But now we were keeping up with all this lab. We're going to do, good gracious, we got 10 people in here. We're doing what, 14 labs, I think. It's 140 lab papers that I'm going to have to grade. And then I try to store those. So what we like to do is that I keep up your grade on that lab form. And at the end of the semester, if you want your labs back, I'll give them back to you. But I keep the lab form because that's the way I graded you, right? You understand? And now I've got a document of how you're graded, so I don't need the lab anymore. There is one lab we have to keep. That's a reversing circuit where we learn how to use relays to reverse a motor. We have to keep that because that's one of our student learner outcomes, one of our SLOs that we use for accreditation. So that's one lab that I have to keep. And I keep all your chapter quizzes too. I can't give those back. For reasons that if I give you back your chapter quizzes with all the answers, then what happens is the next class everybody makes 100 on them, and they don't learn anything. So, and then plus we use the chapter quizzes. That's part of our SLO too. So first thing you need to do is obtain a blank lab form. There's going to be a book up here that looks like yours. It's going to be up here. It's going to be, but on the top it's got corrections. So there's a lot of times we had to make modifications on labs. So what you need to do, the first thing you're going to do when you start up, before you actually start wiring, is you're going to come up here and you're going to look in this book and see if there's any modifications on the circuit you're fixing to wire. If there's modifications, you're going to make those modifications inside your book. Right? Does that make sense? So that way, when I come back there, I don't have to memorize the modifications that I wrote up here because you've done them inside your lab book. And this happens all the time. People go up there and they'll wire a circuit, and it's not even a circuit they were supposed to wire. Do they get extra credit for it? No, because then I have to give extra credit to everybody. So if you look at the very back of your lab, the last page, it shows you the labs we're going to wire. So that shows you right off the bat what you're going to do. So sometimes we don't wire all the labs inside the lab, right? You understand that? So we might have a lab chapter that's got 5 labs in there, and we might only wire 2 of them. So y'all can see the way it's divided up into chapters, and each chapter has a title. So how many labs are on there? Can y'all count them? Some of them might say homework lab out there. Don't one of them say homework? Huh? Yeah, those are basically write-in labs. So one of our first labs is going to be a safety lab, and it's just fill in the blanks, right? Right. One of them you have to measure the voltage on a wall outlet. Where y'all going to find a wall outlet at? At your house. So we had people think that they had to come in here and measure one of mine when it just says measure the voltage on wall outlet. So those we're going to do at home. So we should make, I think the first lab should be due, we'll probably make it due next Wednesday, the first homework lab. The first lab that we're actually going to do hands-on is going to be the inventory. And then we'll do logic. We'll do ands, ors, nots, nands, and nors. And we're going to do those with push buttons and switches. Fill in the required information at the top of the lab form before starting the lab. Make sure, Mark, make sure to write your name. So there's another, and your partner's first name, your first and last name in the space provided, right? There should be an example of a lab form on there. Do y'all see that? And it should be filled out. Check your instructor's lab manual for corrections and modifications, and document the changes in your lab manual, both your lab manuals. You're working with a team, so both of y'all should have this documentation in there. That way, if one of your partners are absent, then you can continue on without them, right? Write your first and last name on the title page of the experiment. Not having your lab grade form at the workstation filled in with the required information at the instructor sign off will result in 10 points deducted from your lab. I come trucking back there, you're ready for a sign off. We got 5 groups up here waiting on the lab, and I get back there and I say, where's your lab form? Oh, I forgot it. You want to run up here and you want to come back there and you want to fill it out. That's fine, but I'm going to take off 10 points, right? Because you didn't do what? Follow instructions, right? When your team needs a lab instructor check or help, one team member must write his or her name on the sign-off sheet located on the podium. There's a podium right there, and the sign-off sheet is up there, right? Located on the podium. In the appropriate column, write your name, place a check mark in the box indicating if you need help or you need a sign-off, right? And write the number of the assigned trainer station. Y'all know where the number is at. It's up in the upper right-hand corner. Y'all see that? Any questions? Now's the time to ask them, right? The instructor will check off lab and answer questions in the order that names are placed on the sheet. So I'm coming up here to check that thing right there, and you're trying to grab me. That don't work in this class. So you don't grab me, right? You understand? You need to do what? You need to sign that sheet. So who's on that sheet? That's what I go by, right? I go by that sheet. And by the way, I come up here and there's 4 names on there. I get a piece of paper. I'll mark them off and I'll write and this is why you got to put your station number on there. On my sheet of paper, I write the number of the station I'm supposed to go to. So that's why I want you to put your number up there. And then I mark those off. So just because you come up here and you're the first name on the list, that's not marked off, it don't mean you're next, right? Everybody understand that? That happens all the time. So everybody okay on that? The instructor will check off labs and answer questions in the order the names are placed on the sheet. Write the manufacturer terminal numbers, line numbers, numerical cross-reference numbers on the line diagram of each circuit before you begin instruction. So that's even the way I check it. So when I come back and check it, I'm going to look at numbers, right? You understand? I'm not going to try to look at components. I'm going to say, okay, this goes to number 3 on the push button station. So it makes it real easy not only to wire them, but it also makes it a lot easier for me to check them. Everybody okay? Y'all understand that? So we're not dealing with wire numbers. We're going to deal with manufacturer numbers. And where are you going to get the manufacturer numbers at? On the top of the module, top right-hand side, right? I think they're all on the top right-hand side. Students in a team must take turns connecting circuits. So if you're back there, there's none of this stuff or you're up there wiring a circuit and your buddy's out taking a break. That don't work in this class. You're a team. You're going to be graded together. There's none of this stuff where you come in there and say, well, I didn't wire the circuit. Because you get credit. Y'all are a team. So the way this works is one team member is wiring the circuit. The other team member is telling that team member where to wire, right? You understand? The other team member said, okay, you need to take that wire and hook it up to number 2 on the push button station. Y'all understand that? And then the next circuit, what you're going to do? You're going to swap team positions, right? You understand? So the person so everybody gets a chance. We're not going to be in here where one person does the wiring and the other person gets out of here. I think I told my other class, I taught a class in advanced PLCs. Another instructor, a part-time instructor, taught intro to PLCs. I took advanced PLCs and I got in there and there was guys that didn't even know how to load the application up. And they passed intro to PLCs. Well, what did that instructor do? One guy controlled the computer and sat there and did all the labs, and he let everybody in the group get credit for them. Then when they got into advanced PLCs, those guys dropped. I had 3 people drop the class the first week because they didn't even know how to turn the PLC on. They didn't even know how to load the application. They had no idea how to set up a line diagram. Because why? They didn't ever do it. But they passed intro to PLCs. That instructor never taught for us again, by the way. So even in any lab, you're supposed to be doing what? Even in DC, if your DC instructor is not making you swap every time, then I want you to tell me. because that's what we're supposed to do. Everybody in a group, and this is why we don't want to get threes. We like to do twos. Twos is good. Threes, somebody usually always get left out. A student in a team must take turns connecting circuit. Each team member must document the constructor of the circuit in the space provided on the lab form. Team member not connecting the circuit is the team supervisor and must provide manufacturing numbers as to where the connections are to be made. Team members that are not present are responsible for the correct connection of I don't know what that sentence means. Team members that are present, I'm sorry, I read are not in there. Team members that are present are responsible for the construction and connection of the operation of circuit. So both team members are responsible. You're going to be graded the same, right? You understand? You say the circuit's working, I go over there and the circuit's not working. You can't say, well, so-and-so did it wrong, right? You understand? Because you're a what? You can say we did it wrong, but you can't say so-and-so did it wrong. Place a check mark. Place a check mark beside each experiment procedure step as it's completed. I come over there and I'm doing sign-offs, and I know exactly where to sign off because it's going to be after the last check mark. So come over there. What you're going to do is your lab book. If you look at the lab, they got these little square boxes over there. What are those square boxes for? Check it off. And that way, if you don't complete a circuit. So nobody else in this college uses these white panels. So that means you can start a circuit. So there's no such thing as we don't have time to start, not unless it's 5 minutes, right? You understand that? I've had people want to leave 30 minutes before the class is out, and they say, well, we don't have time to start the circuit. That's not true. You have time to start the circuit, but by George, you better document where you got to, right? The back of the lab form, that's a perfect place to make notes. Right? And then, of course, check marks. So if you check off, then when you come back in here, you're going to be able to start where you left off. That's almost as bad as asking me, is it okay if I go? Because I can't tell you. But you're an adult if you need to go. And it also says in here, if you're not here, I don't want to hear either. I'm going to go on home because my partner's not here. So what you've just done is you've placed your lab grade on your partner because your partner's not here. So you end up, you don't get labs done at the end because your partner wants to be absent all the time. And so now you make an F in the class because of your partner, not because of you. So if your partner's not here, you keep going. And when your partner comes back, there is no makeup in this class unless you both of you get through. If your team gets through with the lab, all the labs, then if you didn't do a lab, you can go back. That's the only reason. We got more labs in this class than just about, there are probably going to be 1 or 2 groups in here to get through with all of them. So we have really no time for you to let your partner go back and make up a lab because they were absent. I don't want to hear that. Right? You understand? When your partner comes back, they come in where you're at. And you can get partial credit for the lab. Or you can hold off on it, right? You understand? And maybe you might be able to do it later, but it's going to be highly improbable, not very often. And ever have the instructor check your work procedure step, the instructor must initial your lab book indicating that step that has been successfully completed. Skipping over any supervisor check will result in 0 on the section of the experiment. So we don't want you to go ahead because odds are when you go ahead, because you're waiting on a sign off, if you go ahead, you're probably going to undo something that I wanted to see, right? You understand that? So what you need to do, when it says have your instructor check your work, what do you need to do? You need to come up here and put your name on the list, right? And then wait your turn. All circuits must be checked for shorts. We've already talked about that, right? So if you blow the fuse, guys, it's not my fault. If a fuse is blown due to not checking the circuit, you're going to lose 20 points off your grade, and I'll give you a new fuse. When we had an instructor in here, there's no reason to check. There's no reason to blow a fuse, not unless it's my fault. It might be my fault. It's been my fault before. Right? Okay. It might be my fault. right? You understand? And some things get past you, but what you're going to do is you're going to check the thing for what? A short every time before you put power. And then I'll come over there and I'll check it. I'll check L2. If L2 is hooked up right, so when I come and check yours, and so every time it says how the instructor apply power to the circuit, I'm going to come over there and I'm going to check the L2 side. If the L2 side is wired right, then there's no way, it doesn't mean the circuit is going to work. It's just no way in the world you're going to get a short circuit. Does that make sense? Because if L2 doesn't get over to L1, we can't have a short circuit. So when I do that original check, I'm not checking to make sure if the circuit's wired right. So we people have that, well, you've already signed it. Well, I'm not signing the circuit off. I'm signing that it's ready to put power on there, right? You understand that? The instructor will form a basic safety check and energize each circuit before the circuit operation can be confirmed. Once you are, so I'll put power on the circuit and then I'll walk away. Once you are confident that the circuit is working as prescribed, have the instructor check the circuit and initial your lab book in lab grade form. So I'm going to initial the circuit and the lab grade form. Everybody okay? Questions will be asked by the instructor to determine if you understand the circuit's operation. Circuits that are not checked by the instructor will have to be reconstructed to get partial credit. Everybody okay on that one? Yes or no? Each team member must complete a lab grade form. So it's not one lab grade form per team. It's one lab grade form per student because that's your grade. It's not your team's grade. It's your lab grade. Lab grade forms are not to leave the classroom. All lab grade forms must be turned in to the instructor at the end of each lab session so we can keep up with time. Lab grade forms will be returned to each student at the start of next class. We have 2 boxes. The lab grade forms stay here. You can take your labs home, but what most people do is they leave their labs here too, so that way they don't do what? Don't forget them. In fact, like I said, there's nobody else using these tables. Oh, y'all's tables don't have that, dang. So what we do on sensors is we let them put them in the drawers over there, but y'all don't have lab grade forms. So what people normally do is they'll go ahead and take the lab out of their lab book. They'll go ahead and staple the lab grade form to it. And then we've got a box up here that says labs not ready to be graded. And that's where you could put those at. If you put it in the box that says lab ready to be graded, those are what I'm going to pull out and grade, right? You understand that? Everybody okay there? Questions at the end of each experiment and experiment chapter quizzes are not a team effort and must be answered individually by each student. Do not copy answers from the book or from the other students. Copying will be a 0 on all parties involved. So your chapter, you're going to work as a team on constructing circuits and getting circuits signed off. You're not working as a team to answer those questions in the lab book, right? Y'all understand that? Those are yours. So that's what's going to differentiate your grade from your team member's grade. And don't make me send you to Dr. Crawford for cheating. And I've seen it. Questions at each experiment or chapter quizzes must be answered at home or while you are waiting on instructor sign-off. So it's not going to be, so what we're going to try to do in this class is, if you're in here, we're going to build circuits. We're not going to answer chapter questions. We're going to build circuits in here. Now, if you're waiting on me and a sign-off and you come over here and you're working on your questions, that's fine. But you're not going to complete a lab, come over here and do your lab questions, right, and have that lab patent, have that thing up there sitting idle, right? You understand? So what I want you to do is I want you to do all your chapter quizzes and all your questions at home. And when your team members are here, you're going to be doing what? When you're in lab here, you're going to be wiring circuits because that's what you're getting. So what are you getting graded by? Right? Quantity and quality, and then safety. So you can do those lab questions at home, right? You understand that. But you need, anytime you're here, you're going to be wiring circuits. Everybody okay? Once you complete an experiment, staple the lab grade form in the upper left-hand corner. Why did I do that? I never had any problems with that. But then I had one guy that stapled in the upper right-hand corner, and it was so hard for me to grade labs. Because I'm sitting on this side, right, and I'm flipping labs, but now I had to flip them backwards. So staple them in the upper left-hand corner. Are you okay there? Pages are placed in the book, let's say experiment pages, and place it in the box labeled motor control labs to be graded. Right now it's in the office back there. This box is located, it's going to be located up on this table right here. Okay? Do not forget to write your name and space provided on the lab grade form. Also make sure you write your name on the top of the experiment title page. Include the front page or the title page on every experiment. This happens all the time, not every time I've taught it, but you'll get a lab grade form, and then I turn the page and it don't have the title page for the lab. And then I try to grade it and I realize the lab grade form is connected to the wrong lab. Right? And plus I tear the lab grade form off, and now you have no title page. So the title page is included in the packet that you turn in. Everybody understand that? Because it's got the title number up there, right? You need to put your name on the title page. Why do you need to put your name on the title page? Well, sometimes this lab grade form gets tore off. And now we got a lab up here that don't have a grade, that don't have a name on it, right? You understand? Make sure you write your name on the top experiment title page. Include the front. And what pages get included is if you put anything on, if you write on any page, that page gets included. But what you'll find out, some of these labs have about 3 or 4 pages of discussions, which are really, really good. It's a real good study. I don't need those. I just need everything that you wrote on, right? Plus the title page of the lab. The title page of the lab, not the title page of the chapter. So y'all look at, if y'all got the lab book, start turning in it. What you'll do is you'll see a title page for the chapter. And it'll have like experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3. That is not the title page for the experiment. That's the page for the chapter. I don't want that turned in. That don't mean anything to me. I want the title page for the experiment. So when you start turning, you'll start seeing the experiment. The experiment is going to have a title, right? No, the title page for the experiment. So that's just the front page. So this is the title page for the experiment. So this is the title page for the chapter, right? I don't know if it's turned in. Okay. But right here, this is the title page for the experiment. This is what you'll turn in. So not the one that says experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3. That is the title page for the chapter. I don't want the title page for the chapter. I want the title page for the experiment. Yeah. No, that's the title page for the chapter. See experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3 at the top. And you keep turning. There's the experiment. Are we okay? The chapter is given an abbreviation. All the experiments with that chapter has the same abbreviation. If you look down at the page number, it's got 2 letters, maybe 2 or 3 letters. What does it say? No, down at the bottom at the page number. Like PC, MC, or something like that. Y'all see that? Okay. Those, when you look at the lab form, that's what I want right here. Not the page number, just the 3-letter or the 2-letter designator for that lab chapter. Everybody understand? So what's your first lab? Safety. This is the homework lab, by the way. And then I look down there. It says what? What's the letters down there? So all I would put right here would put an S. Not a page number, an S. So that's a chapter abbreviation right there. Then what are you going to put right here? The experiment number. So you'd put S, then you'd put experiment 1, and then you put the title over here. So what's the title of the first experiment in the safety section? Safety. You understand that? So that's just the abbreviation for the chapter. Okay, does that make sense? Are you okay? Abbreviation for the chapter, the experiment number, and then the title. Are you okay? That makes sense. Any questions on that? I'll run them off, and they'll be inside. We have on this side we have a clipboard that opens, and all the blank ones will be inside the clipboard. So what you'll do before you start the experiment, what's one of the things you're going to do? You're going to get a lab form, right? They're going to be up here on the podium. So the sign-off sheet will be on a clipboard. The clipboard opens up, and inside the clipboard, that's where all the blank lab forms are going to be. One lab form per experiment, right? Per member. That makes sense? Are you okay? Any questions? Yes or no?
What do you mean, like title page?
We'll bring your lab book up here and I'll show you. Okay. So this is not the title page for the experiment. This is the title page for the chapter. Okay. That's the title page for the experiment. Okay. Experiment 1, that's the name of it, right? And then this would be S, that would be the...
So it's not the questions that I was looking at. That would be the like end of the chapter quiz.
No, this is a lab quiz.
Okay.
The end of the chapter quiz is at the end of the chapter. Okay, so y'all got a lab book. If you don't have one, get one you can look on to. Okay. So what you'll see is you start turning them, right? You understand? You'll run into the chapter title page. It's going to have experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3. So we have 3 safety quizzes. You keep turning them, you're going to run into experiment 1. Okay. Everybody okay? You'll see that. And then you'll go through experiment 1. At the end of experiment 1, there is some questions. That is not the chapter quiz. That is the questions for that experiment. Are y'all following me so far? Okay. Keep turning to, go to experiment 3. And then just keep turning. You're going to run into a multiple choice test. On page what? S28. That is the chapter quiz. So what you have is you have questions at the end of each experiment, and then you have a chapter quiz at the end of each chapter. Everybody understand that? See how that works? And then if you once you go past the chapter quiz, you'll be into another chapter. And what's the next chapter? System familiarization. This is the lab we're going to do in class. System familiarization is basically is you're doing a checklist to see what parts you have. It's got a bunch of pictures and stuff like that in there. So y'all see how that works now. Everybody okay? So y'all see the lab questions, and then every chapter has a multiple choice quiz, right? You understand that?
For the chapter experiment 1, 2, and 3, and we have a question and answer. But I think we don't need this page to be attached, right, which has an instruction on it.
Not the discussion, no.
Just
It's the experiment. All you're going to do is turn in the experiment. You're not going to turn in the chapter discussion. You're going to turn in the experiment. Any more questions? Yes or no? Once you complete this experiment, you're going to staple it together. You're going to include all the pages, right? You understand that? The chapter quiz is going to be stapled. You don't turn it in separate. You're going to staple it to the last experiment in that chapter. So this right here has the S chapter, the safety chapter, has 3 experiments. Which experiment are you going to attach the chapter quiz to? The last one. Everybody understand that? And if you look at the lab form, there's a section for chapter quizzes, but it'll only be when I grade the last one inside that chapter. Everybody okay there? Chapter quizzes must be completed and stapled to the last experiment completed in that lab chapter. Lab chapter quizzes will be graded separately from the experiment. Make sure you write your name at the top of the chapter quizzes. I'm going to cut these chapter quizzes off, so just make sure you put your name on the chapter quiz too, right? You understand? Because like I said, I have to keep the chapter quizzes.
Basically, we're turning every experiment well, experiment 1, 2, 3, and
They turn in separate. So every experiment is a different experiment, right? They get their own. Every experiment gets their own lab form, and they're turned in separately. If you look at the grade book, you've got a grade entry for every chapter, and they're called like S1, S2, S3. Okay. What you do is when you get to lab 3 in the S section, because they're different in different chapters, you're going to attach the chapter quiz to that lab. That answer your question? Or you need to bring your book up here, let me show you. Okay, so that's experiment 2. This is experiment 1, right? No, that's experiment 3. So what you'll do is you'll complete this experiment right here. This is at a home lab, right? Okay. So this is not an experiment. So this is experiment 1. You're going to complete experiment 1. You're going to answer the questions in the back of experiment 1. You're going to put your name up here. You're going to fill out the lab form. You're going to staple the lab form to this, and you're going to turn it in. Okay. Then you're going to do experiment 2. You're going to do the same thing, right? Understand me so far? Do experiment 2, right? Fill in the lab questions, and then staple it and put it together. Lab 3, though experiment 3, what you're going to do in experiment 3, you're going to answer these questions, but then you're also going to do what? Yeah, that's right. The chapter quiz. I can get one open up. The chapter quiz. You're going to write your name up here because I'm going to cut these off, right? And just staple it to lab 3. So the chapter quiz is going to be stapled to the last lab in that chapter, right? You understand that? Huh?
For the safety.
Yeah, for safety. But the last experiment in every chapter. We're going to do labs in most of these chapters through there, and every chapter has a quiz.
3 separate labs.
3 separate labs. There's 3 separate labs. So if you look at the grade book, it's got lab S1. So that'd be the safety section, lab 1, right? S2, S3. So every one of them's going to be graded separately. Any more questions? So you need to ask them now, right? So what you're going to do when you do the lab form, first thing you're going to do when you pick it up is do what? Put your name up here. Put your partner's name up here, right? Understand? You're going to put the abbreviation for the chapter. So the first one, that would just be a what? S. Then you're going to put the experiment. The first one's going to be experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3. You're going to put the what? The name of the title, right? Now, down here, this is where you're going to put the amount of time you worked on the lab for a day. This is not the time. This is the amount of time. So I don't want to see a 5:30 p.m. out there, right? You're just going to put a number of hours. I worked on this 1.2 hours or something like that. What are you going to put right here? Who built the circuit? Who wired the circuit, right? You understand that? The other person is basically the supervisor, really. And then down here, this is where I fill in this. This is where I mark off points. And then at the end, I'll put the lab, what you what you lost on lab questions are 5 points apiece. What you got on the experiment, what you did on other things out here. Then if it's the last one in the chapter, the chapter grade would only be on the last experiment on the lab form for the last experiment inside that chapter. Each chapter quiz is worth 50 points. There's 10 questions back there. That's 5 points. So it drops down fast, right? 5 points apiece. So you miss one, you go from 100 to a 90. You miss two, you're down to an 80, right? Yeah, 5 points apiece on a 100% scale. This shows the way I'm going to make deductions. Like I said, the first 4 weeks, I'm lax on this, right? After that, we're going to go into a real strict grading period after that because you've been working on these things for 4 weeks, right? You understand that? Everybody understand that? And then these are the experiments we're going to do. So all the safety, we'll make those do, all the safety labs, we'll make those do next Wednesday because we have a test on Monday. Are you okay there? These are all homework. And then these, one is where we're going to inventory the parts. So that's lab 1. We're going to do that, try to do that tonight. Then 2 and 3 are going to be homework, and we'll make those do week after next, okay? Unless you have a weekend to work on those. So this is the one we're going to do tonight. We're going to do system familiarization, lab number 1. So let's look at that one. So it's SF. So what I do on this one, I actually give you the abbreviation right here. So we're looking at chapter SF. We're looking at experiment 1. Now, if you don't have your lab book tonight, you should be okay because what we do on this one is we have a checkoff sheet. You probably fell down here on the floor. When you find the parts, what you're going to do is you're going to check these things off. So I don't really need to have your lab book to grade this off. But you do have to turn in, is there questions on the end of this lab? On lab 1? Yeah, to get grade for the lab, you're going to have to turn in those questions, guys. Y'all know that, right? So you'll have to go back in and do the stuff. So what you need to do if you don't have your lab book, just make notes tonight. And then when you do get your lab book, go back and fill that back in, right? Y'all okay there? Everybody okay? But notice what it does. It's got, y'all looking at lab 1. When you start turning, it starts giving you the components. And it gives you a name. And it also gives you a picture of it, right? They put out 2 versions of this. I think we use all ours are the NEMA versions, the National Manufacturing Association version. I think they have the IEC version in there, which is international. So they put out two different components. We use the NEMA in here, the pictures. Y'all see what I'm talking about? Yes or no? Don't they have pictures in there of all the devices? Y'all gonna check out? Yeah. Of course, the disconnect is pretty easy. I don't have a checkoff list on the disconnect. So we okay? Y'all got any questions? I don't know. What page is the lab on? So it's the second chapter, SF chapter. And experiment 1 starts on page 5. No, this is the checkoff right here. Yeah. I know what you mean. So guys, now's the time to pair up, pick out one of these trains.